The New York Mets lost on opening day. Rhys Hoskins changed jerseys, but not really colors inside. Showed he's still a Philly with a little brawl on the field with the Mets. Freddy Peralta looked amazing. We will break down everything from opening day and more on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Well, the Mets were due for an opening day loss, and that ultimately happened on Friday. But I got to say, it was just great to be watching Mets baseball again. And who does not love opening day? There's something about the ceremonies, to see guys like Kodai Senga and Edwin Diaz get the ovation they did as they went down the line, to see, of course, the massive amount of members on the staff that were introduced, from the analytics people to the chefs. It was a very, very long ceremony. Howie Rose earned his paycheck today. And then you got to the opening day lineup. And when you see those guys running out there, you see the smile on someone like Brett Beatty's face for his first opening day start. To me, it's hard not to get chills. And I even found myself, shockingly enough, like slightly choked up. I don't think a tear actually fell, but just to get baseball back and to, even through the TV, to feel the energy in that ballpark, a really cool day. Unfortunately, though, things did not go the Mets' way in this one. Jose Quintana got the start, and I think he threw the ball pretty well, all things considered. It started off pretty rocky. He walks the leadoff batter on 4 pitches, so you're already worried. And Jackson Chourio was that leadoff man for the Brewers. And we saw why they gave him that contract extension before he even played a game, and why he made the opening day roster at 20. This kid has a lot of talent, a lot of athleticism on display. He stole second base after drawing that walk. I will note, great throw by Francisco Alvarez, picking the ball on a backhand and delivering a seed down to second. It just wasn't in time for the speedy Chourio. And then, though, Quintana walked the tightrope and got out of that jam. He got a huge strikeout on William Contreras. And then Rhys Hoskins ends up hitting a double play ball. Beatty to McNeil, Hoskins thrown out at first. Those names, we'll get to those a little bit later. Hoskins looking real slow running down that first baseline. You could tell he's coming off an ACL injury. He never was fleet of foot, but man, that was a slow turn. It's not like the ball got to Beatty quick. It was pretty surprising when Hoskins ended up being out, and that kept a run off the board there. And the Mets end up drawing first blood in this game from none other than Starling Marte. It's always the guy that couldn't buy a hit in spring that ends up getting off to the hot start. And Marte had just an amazing at-bat, really showing his health in this game, just to see the way he was moving in the outfield and just how locked in he was against a great starting pitcher in Freddy Peralta. And we'll have plenty on Freddy Peralta in the next segment here. But Marte falls behind 0-2, battles in that at-bat, gets it to an 8-pitch at-bat, and on the payoff pitch, 3-2, he takes an inside fastball, turns on it, hits a 109-mile-per-hour exit velocity line drive down the left field line and hits off the top of the fence for a home run. But that was it for the Mets all day. Only hit, only run on that homer. Christian Yelich answered back with a home run of his own in the top of the 4th inning, solo shot as well, so kept the game even. The Brewers end up chasing Quintana in the 5th. He walked the 9th batter with 1 out. That's a big no-no. Gave up a hit to Chourio where the way the infield was placed, there was a wide open hole between the second baseman, McNeil, and Pete Alonso at first, and he just hit a ground ball through it. That put runners at the corners, and then Quintana gave up a sacrifice fly that put in a run there. William Contreras hit it. He then gives up another base hit, this one to Christian Yelich as well, and that pulls him from the game at 4 2/3 innings pitched. So all told, Quintana gave up 6 hits, walked 2, 2 earned runs, struck out 4. His ERA after the first game is at 3.86. That's sort of what you expect from Quintana, right? You hope he gets through 5 and most of his starts moving forward, but he's not the reason the Mets lost this game. It comes down to the offense. more than anything. And again, we'll talk about that more in the next segment as we get to Freddy Peralta. But let's talk a little bit about Rhys Hoskins. So he actually comes up at the end of that 5th inning with runners on. Drew Smith came in to relieve Quintana, got a big strikeout over Hoskins. Hoskins did nothing in this game but, make noise and draw a walk. So that all came in the 8th inning. I will note in the 7th inning, Jorge Lopez, a little bit rocky, gave up a leadoff double. There was a bunt base hit, which put runners at the corner. So he's sitting there, 2 runners on, nobody out, gets a couple ground balls, one of them being an inning-ending double play, and escapes the big bad inning, just gave up the 1 run. All right, let's talk about the play of the game, though. 8th inning, Michael Tonkin's pitching. He strikes out Christian Yelich. He walks Rhys Hoskins, and there's a double play ball hit. Again, it goes Beatty to McNeil. Willy Adames was running this time, so the chance of the Mets turning it a lot more slim than compared to when Hoskins was running down to first base. But Hoskins was running into second base, and he just felt it inside him as a former Philly, the Chase Utley heritage coursing through his blood. As soon as you change jerseys, you never give up the rivalry. And he has a late slide into second base. Wasn't as gruesome. McNeil was not turning with his back to him and all the other stuff, and there was no injury. But that slide definitely was late. They said it was legal. They said he was making a slide through the base. From letter of the law, it was fine, but it was definitely late. He definitely cleated Jeff McNeil, went into his legs hard, and McNeil did not like it at all. Immediately standing over him, shouting obscenities, saying F you to him, pointing at him. Hoskins, of course, gets up, waits till he runs all the way to the other side of the field where he's far away from Jeff McNeil. Doesn't even address Jeff McNeil after the play. I will note that one. Waits till he's by the bench, by the protection of all of his teammates, to start making the crying faces and putting on a show. It's good. I hadn't seen Hoskins in a while, so I forgot why I hated him. We all remember now. We all go back to that long home run trot from years ago. SNY showed it on the broadcast. But that was sort of the big fiery moment of the game. Of course, you had the comic relief of the bullpen guys jogging out when the fight's already pretty much over, if you even call it a fight. The bench is clear, but no one actually got into any real altercation. But you see those guys who are just casually jogging, which, I know we're going to talk throughout the year about changing some rules in Major League Baseball, like the obstruction play. We saw one with Hoskins. It was all over the place at first base where he sort of obstructed DJ Stewart to get to the bag, but they called that no obstruction on the play. Regardless, we'll talk about changes of rules throughout the season on different things. I wish they could just somehow mandate it that guys in the bullpen, if there's a brawl, they just stay out there. Why are we making these guys jog in? Then they got to walk back out. It's just a waste of time, and it looks ridiculous. Then again, if we did outlaw it, we wouldn't get to laugh at it. So maybe it's good that we keep it. But it's kind of an interesting thing to follow throughout the rest of the series. Hoskins, McNeil, they're going to get a lot of at-bats. There could be other interactions on the diamond between the two of them. So just something to monitor moving forward. It was fun, though, to just, even in a moment like that, just feel the regular season energy again. I don't know. I guess if Hoskins went in like that during a spring training game, maybe McNeil would take the same offense to it. But just to see the blood boiling for everybody, to be back to regular season baseball, I thought it was not that you loved the moment, but I thought it was just cool to be back to baseball. I will also note here, Tonkin, really nice relief outing, gave the Mets 2 scoreless innings at the end of the game that they probably weren't going to win and save the rest of the bullpen. That's why he made this team and why he'll be a pretty big member of this bullpen moving forward. But the story of the game, I've kind of buried the lead, was Freddy Peralta, who was awesome. I want to talk about his performance as well as some holes the Mets might have in their starting lineup. So we're going to get to those things in just a minute. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on the big upset, a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to be used on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all in the tournament. And also right now, we got baseball back. So every day you can look at the Mets game. If you want to place a bet on Francisco Lindor to hit his over on hits, or maybe you want to take, let's see, DL Hall tomorrow, strikeouts. Is he going to strike out a lot of Mets? Maybe you could take the over. There's a lot of different things that you can do over at FanDuel. And again, remember, when you place that first $5 bet, if you win it, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down those nets. Freddy Peralta was dominant in this game against the Mets. As I mentioned, he only hit allowed in the game was to Starling Marte on the home run. He had 8 strikeouts and 6 innings pitched, and he probably could have gone out for a 7th. He was at 92 pitches. Shout out to Brandon Nimmo in that 6th inning. Harrison Bader from the 9th spot swings at the first pitch he gets. Hits a line drive. Hit it well, but still, first pitch swing. And all of a sudden, here was Peralta at 84 pitches with the chance, with a quick out, to go back and get another one for the Brewers. And Brandon Nimmo did not look comfortable in that bat at all. But some check swing foul balls, does what he can, hangs in there for 8 pitches before he strikes out. And ultimately, that was the day for Peralta. But just dominant stuff. His fastball, lives more, 93 and touches 95. But, man, it gets on guys quick because he has great extension. Just nasty pitches throughout the game. Really in command, just attacking the zone. He's such a gamer. And we've seen this now whenever Peralta has faced the Mets. And David Stearns saw it for years when he was running the Brewers. I just want to note, Freddy Peralta starts the season on the Citi Field mound. Maybe he ends it on the Citi Field mound. I have discussed the idea of the Mets trading for Peralta in the past. You don't know. Maybe the Brewers with Jackson Chourio in place, with Rhys Hoskins, who knows? They could be a frisky team this year that still somehow takes people by surprise in the small market and is right in the thick of it in the NL Central or the NL wildcard race. And maybe they aren't sellers. But the one thing we'll see throughout this series is when Freddy Peralta is not on the mound, the Brewers are not going to be as dangerous. They do not have a deep rotation anymore. With Corbin Burns gone, with Brandon Woodruff hurt, it's going to be a lot tougher for them to navigate this season. And if they're out of it, Freddy Peralta would be the best trade chip available at the deadline, bar none. I'm saying pick any player in the game. I don't think anyone would be more valuable at this deadline than Peralta. He makes $5.5 million this year, so he's dirt cheap for this season. And there's 2 club options on his contract, $8 million for 2025, $8 million for 2026. Who is the genius behind that pre-arb extension? None other than David Stearns. I'm sure he'd love to have that contract back and, back on his books now. And I imagine that these are 2 sides that will be very open to trading with each other moving forward. The one big trade the Mets made this offseason was with the Brewers. Maybe we don't call it a big trade. It was Adrian Hauser and Tyrone Taylor. But still, the one trade of major league players was Milwaukee and New York. I think these front offices are going to be very cordial with each other. Matt Arnold learned at David Stearns' hip. I think these 2 guys will be able to communicate. And if the Mets are in the mix and they need a starting pitcher and you can get a guy with 2 more years of control after it, that's the type of deal where David Stearns would be comfortable giving up a lot of prospect capital to win now because it would help you win in 25 and 26. So I just want to let everyone know, you saw Peralta pitch today. Maybe this is foreshadowing of where he might end the season. It's obviously wishful thinking. We don't even know if the Mets are going to be good this year and in the mix at the deadline. But I just want to make it known that if there's one starting pitcher in baseball I like to see the Mets trade for this year, it's that dude. He looked disgusting today. Now, a couple of notes about the Mets lineup that I wanted to break down before we get into David Stearns and Steve Cohen's comments prior to the game. DJ Stewart in the DH spot. It's going to be nice to have JD Martinez. Stewart did work a walk. I believe it was kind of a borderline call that he walked on. Regardless, he did get on base, but he also struck out twice. So to be able to add JD Martinez into that lineup to lengthen things out, that's going to be really beneficial to the Mets. And also, you wonder if DJ Stewart could hang around or come back up this season and play a role that's a little more minimal, but could be a lot more beneficial to the team. What I'm speaking about here is in the bottom of the 9th inning, you're leading things off in a 3-1 game. And who do you send to the plate? Harrison Bader against a tough right-handed pitcher. Now, Bader did put a charge into a pitch from Freddy Peralta earlier in the game, but typically he has not fared well against righties. And in that spot, you want to find somebody on your bench that can get on base. And Carlos Mendoza's options in this game at that point were Joey Wendell, Zach Short, Omar Narvaez, and Tyrone Taylor. You sub in Taylor for Bader. While I would note that Taylor's got a little bit less reverse splits, he also doesn't get on base a lot. So that one doesn't make sense. Omar Narvaez, are you going to really pinch hit your backup catcher in that spot? Not likely. Zach Short, righty for righty. Don't see it. So then your one option was Joey Wendell. And Joey Wendell is not the best hitter traditionally, so the Mets don't go to that option. I believe personally that with Zach Short on this team, Joey Wendell makes a lot less sense than he already did. Wendell as a lefty does not complement. Is he lefty or is he switched? Now I actually want to check that. I'm pretty sure. I know he bats left-handed. I'm just not sure if he bats righty as well. Let me check on that to make sure I'm not speaking out of turn here. He bats left. I was right. So to have him complimenting Brett Beatty at third or Jeff McNeil at second, his two primary positions that he'd be backing up off the Mets bench, it doesn't really fit as well. And now that you have Zach Short in place who can do the same things as far as being a good defender, a guy that can start when Beatty doesn't at third, it just makes less sense to have Wendell on the team, because then you get to these situations where you need a lefty off the bench to hit, and he's your only option. And in the scenario where JD Martinez was on this team, and if he was the DH for this game, if it was DJ Stewart in that spot instead of Joey Wendell, I like it a little bit more. I still wouldn't love it. I'd like to see the Mets find a better left-handed utility type, someone that could even just be stuck out in a left field corner and first base, similar to Stewart, but just a better hitter to be on the Mets bench. But I think that's a definite hole right now, is they don't really have a bat on their bench that you're going to feel comfortable going to. Now, there's the DH now in the National League. It doesn't matter as much to have quality pinch hitters, but I do think there is a little bit of a hole there, and we'll just see how much it comes up throughout the season. That was a clear instance where here's a little Achilles heel that just, of course, gets brought to the surface in a big moment. You need to get a base runner on before the top of the lineup, and it's Harrison Bader, and he's retired quickly. And then all of a sudden, it's Nimmo, Lindor, game over, and the Mets end up falling short on opening day. But we'll see. It's the first game. I would not overreact to it. This was the one where the Mets had the clear pitching matchup disadvantage. I think that now turns over to their side in game two. DL Hall going up against Luis Severino. Hall has nasty stuff, but so does Severino, and Severino has the experience. So we'll see. I'd imagine Hall's going to be pretty juiced up. He was pitching out of the bullpen last year in Baltimore. Now he's starting for a new team that could lead to great results or maybe some poor ones. So I imagine the Mets will be patient. They're going to run out their right-handed lineup. So I think we will see Zach Short at third base. I imagine Starling Marte gets the day off his legs where he'll DH, and Tyrone Taylor will get his first start as well. And hopefully the Mets can even up this series and then turn it over to Tyler McGill to try to close things out in the final game against Colin Rea. But overall, a fun game to watch. Peralta was awesome. Hoskins, not a good guy. And other than that, I got no other notes on opening day. What I want to do to close the show is talk about Steve Cohen's press conference in particular. He said a lot of interesting things before the game, as sort of a state of the union heading into the season. So we'll go through that in just a minute. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's for this opening weekend for baseball, the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have Fire TV. And Fire TV also recently added their Fire TV channels, deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all the latest in the world of sports. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. So Steve Cohen spoke with the media prior to the game, and I thought he said a lot of interesting things about where the Mets are as a franchise right now. and what took place over the offseason. So one of the things he was asked about is the spending this offseason compared to years past. And he did mention there was a budget this year and really did talk about the realities of where the Mets are with the luxury tax, how expensive it is to add players right now, and that every team needs to have a certain budget, and spending the $370+ million that it did last year was a little bit extreme. And I think what I saw in this press conference is Steve Cohen is learning. And look, he's now in his fourth year, if I'm not mistaken, right? 21, 22, 23, yeah, fourth year under his ownership. The first year, I mean, it all happened so quick. You almost throw that one to the side too, because he just had to take over the team late, didn't have a full off season, was in limbo trying to build a front office. It was just kind of a disaster. So really, this is like his third full year that he's getting here. And I can see a guy that has taken his lumps and he understands how tough it is, but is learning how he's got to navigate things owning this team. And he mentioned how you can't do it all in free agency. He also talked about the free agent curve, how you're paying for the top performance on a player that's just naturally going to be declining. And those declining years can really hurt you. And as he mentioned, he said, when you have this free agent curve and you have a roster built on free agency, you'll feel that free agent curve, basically alluding to what happened last year. You're paying Starling Marte and Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander. And for the two aces, while in some respects their pitching was okay, particularly Verlander, they both got hurt. And Marte was banged up. And Canna wasn't quite as good. Escobar, paid him. His second season with the Mets wasn't great. So you do understand where Cohen's coming from. And he talked a lot about that farm system, which we've heard them really focusing on throughout every press availability, especially since Stearns came in, just wanting to get to that sustainable farm. But does that mean that Cohen's going to stop spending? I thought this was the most interesting comment of the day. They asked him, somebody talked about the 110% tax, and then they really tried to nail him down on it as far as the different thresholds. And they asked him, could they ever see the Mets getting below that first level of the tax threshold? And he said, I don't know the answer to that. It seems far away. It seems that could be hard to do. The only way you could really do it is if the farm system were to really produce players. So that's possible, but we don't have to do that. I'm perfectly happy to finance us in a way where that isn't a goal of mine. If it were to happen, that would be fantastic. I would expect to be something in the middle, someplace in the middle. So basically somewhere between below the luxury tax, which probably will never happen, and not being a team with a payroll that when you pay, all the fees and everything balloons to $500 million that he's got to shell out, or, in the case of last year, a $375 million payroll that then got taxed. So it's finding that balance in between. The Mets, maybe they can get out from the Steve Cohen tax line. But I think what his comments tell you is that he's not going to shy away from giving Pete Alonso what he deserves if he has a big season. Or if they have a chance to sign a Juan Soto or a Corbin Burns or whatever big free agent it is. If they can land a top-tier player, they're still going to do it. It's just a matter of not spending to spend, as he said. And, he said even at the 110% rate as far as this year, he said they wanted to, when it came to JD Martinez, they wanted to save some room in the budget to potentially add later in the season. But ultimately, that contract became attractive enough that it was worth it to the Mets. And he said, spending at the 110% tax is expensive, but I am competitive. So if the Mets are in the race, don't be surprised at all if there are aggressive buyers at the deadline, which brings us full circle to the Freddy Peralta stuff. They love their prospects right now, but if you have a chance to win and get a guy that has control, those are moves the Mets will still make. And in the future, when it comes to spending, they're still going to be aggressive in free agency. The reason they didn't spend this year is because, for one, the free agent class wasn't very good. Two, they had a ton of dead money on their books. And three, this isn't really the team that is all in to win. They could be all in at the deadline, but right now, as presently constructed, it's a team that is trying to thread a very interesting needle here, where you want to be sustainable, you want to focus on the farm, you want to leave opportunities to some of your young players, but also you want to be highly competitive. And I think the Mets did a good job building that out this year. Cohen certainly thinks so. And he didn't shy away from making, bold statements, though, because when they asked what the goal was this year, he said the goal is to make the playoffs. If we don't make the playoffs, I would be disappointed. And he should be every year. That should be the goal of this franchise. And I believe they did enough this offseason where that's not an unrealistic goal. The winning the World Series in the first 3 to 5 years, yeah, that was unrealistic. But saying each year you want to make the playoffs, especially with this many spots open with the 3 wild cards, it's not unrealistic at all. Now, closing things out, David Stearns also spoke to the media today. We've heard him a lot throughout the offseason. There wasn't a ton that I took from it that was groundbreaking or things that we hadn't heard before, but there were a couple of notes. Starling Marte, it was just interesting because I was listening to Stearns while I had the game on mute as I'm taking notes for the show, and he's talking about Starling Marte being a healthy player, and as he's saying that to me, I'm watching him hit a home run. So that was kind of a cool, singular moment for me, I guess, just my viewing experience of the day. But yeah, he talked about Marte being healthy, and that's a good start. Said you can't really predict anything on performance, but at least he's healthy, and we're seeing that. He also talked about roster construction, and we hear so much about a 40-man roster, building out that depth. When asked about the strength of this team, he did say the depth, but he alluded to what was beyond the 40. So having a roster 50 to 60 deep. So you're looking at the minor league signings they've made, the top prospects who can factor in. You got to understand that in that front office, the amount of scenarios they're trying to play out and trying to have answers to whenever player X, Y, or Z goes down or doesn't perform, the Mets have really thought through this offseason in a way that I doubt they have ever in the past, as far as just scouring every avenue of the market to find talent and to bring in so many different people into the organization so that they can outlast and be in the mix come September. So I thought that 50 to 60 in the roster comment was very interesting. Also, he was asked about the top pitching prospects. And he said, as far as promoting them, it's a case-by-case basis where it's a combination of the player's development and what's the need at the big league level. He said, certainly we are cognizant that we have some really good arms down there. I'm excited to see how they take to that AAA challenge. Some of them will make their way up here at some point in the season. So, of course, we're looking at Christian Scott, Mike Vassell, and Dom Hamill. Those 3 guys are all in that AAA rotation, and they all represent rotation depth for the Mets. If through the first month of the season, before Senga or Peterson is ready to come back off the IL, they're getting just blown up every time Hauser or McGill takes them out, whatever it is. Or even Buddha makes some spot starts and he looks bad. And Christian Scott is just carving in AAA. Or same thing goes for Vassell or Hamill. The Mets might ultimately decide, you know what, we can't waste those bullets in AAA. This guy's definitely better than 2/5 of our rotation. We got to bring him up and make a tough decision on one of the other guys. I think that can happen, and I was really encouraged to hear Stearns speak that way about that combination of players' development and the needs at the big league level, where if you have a guy like Scott who has a big league fastball for sure and a growing arsenal, and he can survive in the big leagues, and you need an arm, maybe the Mets would be less hesitant to just jump on it and bring up somebody that could really help them win now. So I like everything I heard today from both of those guys, from Cohen and Stearns, because it got me excited for this season. And I think even though this is not the same team as we saw last year with the World Series expectations, an expectation to make the playoffs is feasible. And I'm looking forward to watching them day in and day out as they try to achieve that. And it'll all continue on Saturday with DL Hall versus Luis Severino, 1:40 start again, I believe. I will be doing another show, probably won't be live, but I'll give you another show tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow night. I'll release that one to close out the week here, and then we'll be back on Monday for a series recap of whatever's left. But that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. I appreciate all of you who tuned in live on YouTube. If you're there and you haven't yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're trying to make a push to 9,000 subs on YouTube, so I appreciate all of you who subscribe. You can also, if you're listening to this on the podcast feed later, follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. You can follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. Now head over for your second watch to Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It covers everything in the world of sports with our local experts from each team and our league-wide experts from each league. You find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.